Rob Star Gang, what up? What up? Appreciate everyone joining the live stream. Do me a favor, make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you click that post notifications bell so you don't miss out on any new content. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, you're as always your host, the Ropp Star, ClayRopp. Appreciate everyone being here. So, gonna talk the biggest needs heading into 2025, right? Gonna put in some text into this really. I'm gonna put some major context into this tonight. Because there's a lot, right? Even with the poll question, like there's a lot. We're at some crossroads, man. We are at some major crossroads. We've got the poll up. What's the biggest need? Pass rusher, number one wide receiver, Bryce, run defense help, or, secondary and upgrade linebackers if you are watching on YouTube. Now, here's the thing. The biggest thing I think that this team needs is multitude of things. Let's be honest. Like, we were once a proud franchise with aspirations of sustained success, right? The Carolina Panthers, during that time, the Cam Newton era and the Luke Kuechly era and Thomas Davis and, D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, Smitty, Greg Olson, we were spoiled, right? And so now we've gone through this whole 7 consecutive seasons without a playoff berth that have tested the patience of this fan base and put this organization's leadership under intense scrutiny, while the team's 5-win season in 2024 obviously showed some measurable improvement, right? And so when we talk about this, and we've talked about it here on the show, like what this team needs, right? We've talked about it in free agency just a little bit. We talked about the draft, but we really haven't really talked about, I feel like, on this show, the true needs and the true blueprint behind what this team truly needs, right? So, the harsh reality is that optimism and flashes of potential don't win championships, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to say that again. The harsh reality for a lot of you that you need to realize is that optimism and flashes of potential don't win championships. Sustained results do. Consistency wins championships, right? The good news is, going forward, I feel like the Panthers may have finally found their franchise quarterback, okay, and Bryce Young. Now, he's now going into his 3rd year, but this year I felt like he demonstrated some significant growth, right? Some significant growth, okay? So later in the half of the 2024 season, offering a glimmer of hope for teams' long-term trajectory. The bad news is that almost every other area of the roster remains with holes, right? To me, that's undermining the fact that this team's chances of competing in a increasingly unforgiving NFC South. If Carolina wants to climb out of the NFL's basement and build a contender around their young quarterback, the 2025 offseason is going to be pivotal. What we're in right now. So, I think for us is that when we look at the biggest needs, right? The number one biggest need to me The most glaring weakness that needs to be done to finally turn this franchise around, in my opinion, is pass rusher. And the reason why that is because, again, we are going to be in this 3-4 defense once again. And there is no exaggeration to say that the Carolina Panthers pass rush was one of the worst in the league, if not the worst, right? The Panthers defense was the worst in the league statistically in a lot of categories. Like, the Panthers defense allowed an astonishing 534 points in 2024, ladies and gentlemen. The most ever surrendered in a single season in franchise history. In single season franchise history. You want to know the major culprit behind that? The inability, to put pressure on the quarterback, right? You only had 32 sacks on the year, tied for the third fewest in the NFL. So Carolina's defensive front was both predictable and ineffective. You got Jadeveon Clowney playing in his 11th NFL season, led the team with a modest 5.5 sacks. While his production was respectable given his age and mileage, but relying on a veteran nearing the twilight of his career as the primary pass rushing threat is both unsustainable, indicative of a deeper problem here in Carolina. Because you think about it this way, beyond Clowney, the cupboard is nearly bare. DJ Wanham showed flashed potential for sure, but struggled, right? But struggled to stay healthy. But his skill set is better suited, I think, for a rotational duties than a full-time role. But that's just my opinion. Now, he could come out next year. We could end up getting Abdul Carter, or we get some premier pass rusher, and they keep him full. He comes back full time, and he could change my mind. Maybe he goes back to having 8 sacks like he was averaging basically in Minnesota. So the rest of this defensive edge group, to me, was invisible, was completely invisible, right? So, so we're banking on a lot with what we have left. The thing is that we need a game-changing edge rusher, plain and simple. Someone who can collapse the pocket, command double teams, and register double-digit sacks consistently. So without this kind of disruptive presence, in my opinion, I think Carolina's defense will remain a liability and leaving their secondary vulnerable and their offense perpetually playing catch up, right? So Dan Morgan and this front office must prioritize, I think, either you got to draft or you got to assign an elite pass rusher to breathe life back into this defensive unit. That is number one for me. All right. The next thing is you can make pass rusher 1A and you could say nose tackle 1B or defensive line, honestly. Or you could say same thing, defensive line, true nose tackle 1A, edge rusher, pass rusher 1B. It really could go either way. You can make a case and an argument for both, ladies and gentlemen. So here's the thing. Defensive line. Because our run defense is in shambles. That's my number 2 thing. Our run defense is absolutely in shambles. Like if the pass rush was underwhelming, the Panthers' run defense was downright catastrophic. Right? Like Carolina allowed a staggering 179.8 rushing yards per game in 2024. By far the worst in the league, ladies and gentlemen. By far worst in the league. And to put that into perspective, the second worst team behind them was the New Orleans Saints. They gave up 38.4 fewer rushing yards per game. 38 fewer. So, I mean, opposing offense didn't just run on the Panthers, they dominated them, right? They dominated us. Staying healthy once to get the right pieces is another thing, for sure. Thank you, Eric Blair. Shout out to you, man, with that $5 dono, man. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate that.
Bing bong.
Appreciate that $5 donation, Eric Blair. Appreciate that, Nick Tri-State in the building. What's up? He says totally revamped defense. Yeah, I mean, like if you're just tuning in, man, my number one thing fixing, biggest need heading into this is pass rush. But you can make the case for the defensive line, which is what I'm making the case for now. You could have pass rusher 1A, defensive line 1B, or you could have defensive line 1A, pass rush 1B. You could make the case for either one, right? We need a wide receiver 1, help on run defense, improve run defense is more feasible in free agents than a wide receiver 1 is. Cornbread comes in. Appreciate you coming in, Cornbread. Eric Blair here with the Panthers. Okay. So when we're talking about this run defense, this is number 2 on my list. Okay. This is number 2 on my list. Pass rush is my number 1, which we just went over. But number 2, again, for those of you that, is just tuning in. Again, we allowed 179 rushing yards per game. By far the worst in the league. Again, the New Orleans Saints were was the second worst team, but this is how much of a margin it was. They allowed only 38 yards fewer than us, which means, okay, if you take basically 180 minus 38, they were allowing 142 yards per game, basically. The Saints were. That's how much of a margin it was for this run defense. So, again, our opposing offenses didn't just run on the Panthers. They absolutely just raw dogged us. Let's be honest. Like, you lose Pro Bowl defensive tackle Derek Brown to a meniscus tear week 1. Obviously, one of the most devastating blows you could take in week 1, right? $100 million man. But it's no excuse, I feel like, for the complete collapse of a run defense. Like, one player, you truly think that just one player can just ruin a whole defense? To me, that just proves to me, though, you lose Derek Brown. That means Dan Morgan did not do his due diligence in rebuilding the defense. Now, what they did do is they rebuilt the offensive line. They rebuilt this offense around Bryce Young. Okay? That's what they did do. They couldn't afford to rebuild this defense the way they wanted to because of how much money they spent on the offensive line. Okay? Plain and simple. Okay? So, you were signing guys for the minimum and bringing them here. Okay? So, again, even with Brown, obviously, I know is expected return in 2025. I just still think that this Panthers team cannot afford to rest on hoping that this roster with Derek Brown back is just going to be okay. The lack of depth and talent and physicality needed to be consistent to win games in the trenches. You got to add more depth. I like Ashawn Robinson. I think he's just fine. But you got to get a true nose tackle in this 3-4 defense. I think Derek Brown and Ashawn Robinson will be fine. But you've got to get a true nose tackle. Like a Walter Nolan, I think it is. That's a true nose tackle. I mean, Mason Graham, could he play nose tackle? Possibly. Do I think he's a good fit for the 3-4? No, not really. I think he's a better fit for a 4-3 defense. And again, that's why I say Abdul Carter is a better pick than Mason Graham right now, because he's a better fit in the 3-4 defense because of his versatility that he brings to the table as a pass rusher. Okay? So, when it comes to our biggest needs, man, like, I know that we can expect Derek Brown to return, but we have got to bring depth and talent and physicality if you want to consistently win in the trenches. These backup defensive linemen we've got were overwhelmed. The linebackers behind them weren't equipped to clean up that mess, right? You got to think about it this way. The reinforcements that we were needing or were hoping for, or we were desperately just wanting each and every week, particularly run-stuffing defensive tackles who can clog those gaps and disrupt the backfields. The Panthers, you have to invest into interior defenders who can complement Brown and anchor that line. Because without a massive overhaul in this area, I think their defense will continue to be gashed week after week. Now, again, I think if you go out, because I think we could, for the pass rush, this is why I say you could make it 1A for pass rush and make the defensive line 1B. Or you could make the case for defensive line 1A and pass rush 1B. I think if you went out and you go and you get an Abdul Carter, for example, okay, you could go defensive line the rest of the way. Or you could go defensive line and maybe grab a linebacker in a corner, right? It all depends. It all depends. And you can then rebuild that defensive line. Now, free agency, it's just like Cornbread said. I mean, he does make a good point that, we do need a wide receiver 1 for Bryce Young, but we need help on the run defense. I think you can rebuild part of this run defense, and I think it is feasible in free agency than it is to get yourself a number 1 wide receiver. It all depends on T. Higgins, though. I think T. Higgins is a guy in free agency you could sign and get Bryce a wide receiver 1. Garrett Wilson, you're going to have to trade your mortgage to get. Right? DK Metcalf, that's going to come with a massive contract. I think you're going to have to pay DK Metcalf a big contract, probably more than T. Higgins, honestly. Even though some people may think that T. Higgins is a better wide receiver. But everybody is also saying we don't need another wide receiver. I think it all depends. I do think that it does depend on Adam Thielen, but I do think bringing in a guy like a T. Higgins or DK Metcalf is beneficial. I think those are your 2 best bets. Garrett Wilson, yeah, I think he's the better fit for the whole offense. But again, you're going to have to trade the mortgage to get him. All right. But again, 1A, 1B. It's up to you. I got pass rush at 1A. And then I got defensive line at 1B. Now, the next thing is that we've got to fix is that these defensive backs, we need defensive back help. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Like, we are in a secondary in a flux. Like, this secondary struggles in 2024 weren't entirely surprising to me. But the looming uncertainty, obviously, us going into 2025 is alarming to me when we talk about like safeties like Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, who accounted for over 83% of the team snaps at that position. So are they all set to, and those guys are all set to hit free agency. So it's adding concerns to me that is the status of breakout cornerback Mike Jackson, right? Obviously, whose best season in 2024 this year, which not a lot of people I think like Mike Jackson, but he is an intriguing option. Okay, like we still have our Pro Bowl corner J.C. Horn, right? He can't do it alone though. Like this secondary recorded just 9 interceptions in 2024, tied for the 5th fewest in the league. So again, the lack of playmakers, the depth in the defensive back this season to me was glaring, ladies and gentlemen, especially against teams who have a higher power motor passing attack. Like if you think about it, if Jackson departs in free agency, you got to find a reliable number 2 cornerback to pair with Horn. And that becomes an immediate priority. I think additionally, the safety position requires a complete overhaul, whether through re-signings, the draft, or free agency. Like the Panthers need defenders who can lock down opposing receivers and create turnovers because without takeaways, the defense will continue to struggle, right? What's up, Marcos? I appreciate you joining, man. You just took the words right out of the mouth of the nose tackle, Clay. It's true, though, man. Step on that like button. I appreciate that, Marcos. Have you heard anything about DK being? People have been saying that, but I've never heard that before. B. Amos, you're going to have to restate that question. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. It's hard to cover when you don't have a pass rush. Well, I'll say this, Eric Blair. I'm going to say this. A wise man once told me that an elite pass rush can make an average secondary look good. Right? So, again, I just want a reliable number 2. I don't need another J.C. Horn or I don't need another Patrick Surtain. As nice as that would be, but the teams normally can't afford 2 guys like that. Okay? So, I hear what you're saying. B. Amos says, have you heard of anything about DK being a diva? People have been saying that, but I've never heard that before. What wide receiver in the NFL at this point, B. Amos, is not a diva? DJ Moore, I've heard's a diva. DK Metcalf, I've heard's a diva. Stephon Diggs, I've heard's a diva. Deontay Johnson, obviously, probably the biggest diva of them all. I don't know. AJ Brown, diva. Right? Like, I feel like a lot of wide receivers are divas. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of wide receivers are divas. It seems that's the position group that just brings out the diva in these guys, man. I don't know. I don't know what it wouldn't surprise me. I feel like we hear that about a lot of wide receivers. I feel like we hear that a lot about a lot of wide receivers, man. It's crazy. It's not just DK. It's not just DK. So it wouldn't surprise me though. Honestly, I feel like the wide receiver position, all these guys are just divas. AJ Brown, DJ Moore, uh, DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, hell, Garrett Wilson could be, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson. Like the list goes on. I feel like just the wide receiver position at this point, just go ahead and call them all divas. Just call them all divas. You know, we got to tackle better. I miss the days our linebackers gobbled up anything that got through. I feel you on that, man. I feel you on that, Rock Jones. I do. I feel you on that. But I'll say this. Another thing that we have to work on, another thing that we also have to get going into next year, another big need is I'll say the inside linebacker is a position that's in turmoil, man. Like Carolina's linebacker core in 2024. You got to think about it this way. Shaq, Josie Jewell, Trevor Wallace all suffered season-ending injuries. Now, Shaq, of course, was early on. Josie Jewell was out for 4 weeks and then played, 4 more games until the last 2 or whatever it was. Trevor Wallace, same thing. Played it once Shaq went down, played up until there was only 2 games left of the season. So you force the team to rely on backups, and you force the team to rely on practice squad players to limp through the season, and then you get the result of basically predictable chaos in the middle of your defense, right? And I think that's the reason why when I came back out and I talked about Ejiro Evero, like it does put in a lot of context that he's working with practice squad players and he was working with players that would probably never start on another team, any other team in the NFL. Be honest with you. Right. So, when I'm looking ahead now in 2025, ladies and gentlemen, the situation remains dire. Like Thompson, he's recovering from a torn Achilles. He's set to become a free agent and may not return. You got Joel, who has struggled with consistency as a tackler, and Wallace, who looks promising, but is still a work in progress. So the lack of stability at such a critical position really has left this team exposed all season long. So I think that with this team does need to just go ahead and inject some more youth, athleticism, reliability at the inside linebacker. And I honestly think maybe get somebody in free agency, but also maybe drafting a linebacker would not hurt. I think whether, if you can find a nice rangy playmaker or sign a proven veteran, either way, addressing that position, I think is going to be critical, especially when you're trying to restore order on this defensive front. Okay? On this defensive front. Another thing is, another big need, though, man, I'll tell you this. Even though we've talked, basically, my first 4 have all been defense, right? My first 4 have been all defense. But now I'm going to say my next thing would be wide receiver. This is probably my second to last most important need. I think it goes pass rush, defensive line, defensive backs, linebacker, then wide receiver. Like, I do think that Bryce does need a true number 1, right? Especially with the encouragement of his development. Like, this wide receiver room does remain as a glaring weakness in my mind. Like, I expect Young to hopefully continue to progress, right? But throwing to a 35-year-old Adam Thielen as his top target, I think is just unfair, right? But also kind of counterproductive, right? Like you got 2 rookies in Leggett and Coker, obviously both showed flashes of potential, but far from ready to shoulder the responsibilities of a true number one wide receiver, right? You need to have a dynamic playmaker for your quarterback who can stretch the field, create separation, win contested catches. I think without this, the Panthers offense will remain one-dimensional and Young's growth will be stunned, right? Everything we saw this year will go to kind of almost like a waste, right? So I do think this front office has to prioritize a bona fide number one, whether you use it as a high draft pick or a significant free agent signing. Pairing Young with a legitimate top tier receiver is non-negotiable if the team wants to unlock that offensive potential, right? That's just my opinion, right? So that's my second to last biggest need. Second to last. Eric Blair comes in and says, our scouting team did well even with undrafted free agents last year. They really need to be firing on all cylinders this draft. For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I hope everyone's having a great Monday night watching the national championship. I've got it over here on this screen. So I'm watching it while I'm talking to you guys. So appreciate everyone that's in here joining the live stream. Again, do me a favor, make sure you like that pound that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, make sure you click that post notifications bell so you don't miss any new content. Also, remember, tomorrow night, 7 p.m., NFC South Roundtable. Should be a good one. Should be a good one. I was on there last week, so make sure y'all continue to tune into that, man. All right. Make sure y'all continue to tune in over there, over at the Roundtable Sports. Okay. Also, check out BetUS sponsorship of this live stream. Sign up for free today. Get 150% bonus on your first 3 bets. All right. But bet responsibly. All right. Bet responsibly. Make sure you bet responsibly. All right. So, another thing is my last biggest need in my mind is the tight end position, right? I think even though Jadavion Sanders, who was a 4th round pick, showed some promise last year, I think he's far from a finished product as well. Like, you got Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas both set to become free agents. I still think leaving the depth chart in limbo mode, but Carolina's offense lacked a consistent safety valve for Young in the middle of the field. So I think you need a reliable dual threat tight end who can block and catch, would significantly elevate the pass game and provide Young with much needed outlet, right? Finding such a player, whether through the draft or free agency, should be a second priority behind wide receiver. But again, y'all know my first 4 are the biggest priorities, but in pass rush is number 1. So, again, the Panthers, I mean, this team may have taken some small steps forward in 2024, right? But again, that small progress isn't going to be enough for us to pull ourselves out of mediocrity, right? Like, this roster still has a glaring deficiencies that I think could derail Bryce's development, waste valuable years off his career, and from the absence of a pass rush to the lack of offensive weapons, from a atrocious run defense to a secondary in flux. You got a lot of challenges this offseason that are daunting, and it's clear. So I think this offseason is going to be a legitimate test for Dan Morgan and Dave Canales and this front office, because this is the time and this is the offseason that they have to execute, right? they have to act with urgency, precision, aggression when you're trying to fix this roster. I think the failure to do so will result in yet another lost season and potentially the squandering of of our franchise quarterback's potential. So I think it's time for Dave Canales, Dan Morgan to put their heads together and prove that we're serious about building a contender. And I think anything less is unacceptable. I'm sorry. This is the time where you want to build this team right. Right? You had a decent draft last year, right? A decent draft. It was good. It wasn't like over the top, in my opinion, right? But this is the time right now that you have to have a really execute the offseason moves this offseason. So that's just me. The continuity going into this offseason will pay off free agency and draft wise. I hope so, Kendall. I mean, continuity is one of the biggest things for this team, right? A lot of the guys that are coming back have been here. But man, you have to execute on these free agents and draft picks because the time is now. This is probably your biggest. This is probably your biggest offseason. This is probably your biggest offseason to really get yourself out of mediocrity and really push this rebuild in that right direction, right? So, again, continuity does matter for sure, Kendall, but dude, I don't think it gets any bigger than this. I think this is probably bigger than last year's offseason. This last year was just getting it started. This is kind of getting it to that point to finish it off next offseason. But also be competitive next season, right? Be a competitive team. Not a 5-12 team, like a team that gets themselves out of mediocrity. That's what this offseason means, at least in my opinion. So, again, pass rush number 1, defensive line number 2. What was it? Pass rush number, I said pass rush number 1, defensive line number 2, defensive backs 3, linebackers 4, wide receiver 5, tight end 6. So that's kind of in the order I would rank those, right? That's in the order I would rank them. But that's just me. So, but appreciate everyone joining the live stream tonight. Appreciate everyone joining in. Make sure you do me a favor. Make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click that post notifications bell so you don't miss out on new content. Go tell your friends, go tell your family, go tell your grandma, your great grandma, your third cousin in Alabama. Go share the Ropp Star Report with your friends, your family. I would greatly appreciate it. Make sure you go also follow me on all my social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We got it back, baby. All right, we got TikTok back, so I was back on there. Obviously, if you guys have been tuning into the shorts, I've been killing it, bringing you some NFL content instead of just Carolina Panthers content. I've been bringing some more of that, some of that NFL content to you guys. So I hope y'all are enjoying that. So again, make sure y'all tune in every Monday through Friday, 8:30 here, EST on the Ropp Star Report. Don't forget tomorrow night, 7 p.m. EST for the Round Table Sports, ladies and gentlemen, the NFC South Roundtable. So again, appreciate everyone joining the live stream. Again, just do me a favor, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Love to hear y'all's thoughts. But if you want to go the extra mile, make sure you click that post notifications bell. Actually, no, 4 things. You should click that post notifications bell because it is free and it notifies you every time I post a short or I post something in the community section, or if I post something up, a video, or notifies you when I'm live. So again, that bell is really important. Again, that's funny. You're not wrong, Kendall. You're not wrong. So again, I appreciate everyone. As always, guys, love you and keep pounding. Peace.